Welcome back for another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to be looking at Surah Al-Ma'un from the Quran.
Right.
It's sometimes called the Surah of Small Kindnesses.
Today.
And it's really interesting because in just 7 verses, it kind of packs a punch
Yeah.
about how our actions and also our inactions really speak to our character.
Absolutely. And what I find particularly captivating about this surah is how it very explicitly links the denial of the Day of Judgment to very specific outward behaviors.
Okay.
It's almost like a blueprint for how a person's internal beliefs, manifest in their interactions with the world around them.
That's a really interesting way to put it. So, let's get into it. The surah opens with this question that pulls you right in.
Yeah.
It asks, have you seen the one who denies the recompense?
Right.
I think for clarity's sake, we should probably explain that. Recompense refers to the Day of Judgment.
Yeah.
That point of accountability where all of our actions in this life are going to be weighed.
And I think what's really powerful is that the surah doesn't get bogged down in abstract theological concepts. Instead, it jumps right into 5 very tangible consequences that manifest when someone rejects this idea of ultimate reckoning.
And the first 2 that are listed really stood out to me. It says, he drives away the orphan and does not encourage the feeding of the poor. And I feel like it's not simply neglecting these people in need, but there's this sense of active rejection in there.
Yes, and the phrasing drives away, I think, really emphasizes this point about the depth of our responsibility.
Okay.
It's not just about, providing the bare minimum like food or shelter.
Yeah.
It's recognizing those deeper emotional and spiritual needs, particularly for orphans who have already experienced such profound loss.
So we're seeing this link right away between denying the recompense and this lack of compassion or empathy for those in need.
Precisely.
And it's almost like whatever their worldview is shuts them off from recognizing those needs.
Exactly. And this brings us to the third consequence, which might seem a little bit surprising at first glance, and that's neglecting prayer.
Oh, interesting.
So the surah describes these people as being heedless of their prayer. And notably, the verse doesn't say, in their prayer, heedless.
Right, because we all have those moments where our mind wanders a little bit when we're praying.
Right, exactly. Anyone can have those moments of absent-mindedness.
Right.
But it specifically says, of their prayer, heedless.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So these individuals, they neglect prayer altogether.
That's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah.
Because it suggests a total disregard for it.
Yes.
Not even just occasional lapses.
Exactly.
It's like it holds no meaning.
Right.
And that makes me think about the idea of hypocrisy.
Yes.
It's not about being perfect in your prayer every single time.
Right.
It's about that sincerity and connection with the divine.
Absolutely. And that's what's missing.
And so these people might pray outwardly
Yes.
as a show.
Yeah, just for appearances.
But their hearts are not in it at all.
Their hearts are completely detached.
Wow.
And that's a very dangerous place to be. It's interesting when you think about that third consequence, neglecting prayer.
Yeah.
There's a parallel there with those first 2 consequences.
Okay.
Driving away the orphan and not encouraging the feeding of the poor.
Okay.
They all reflect this lack of concern for something greater than oneself.
I see what you mean. If you truly believed in that day of judgment,
Right.
where you were going to be held accountable for your actions,
Exactly.
wouldn't you be a lot more mindful of fulfilling those obligations?
Absolutely.
Both, towards the divine and also toward those in need.
Yes, and that actually leads us perfectly to the 4th and 5th consequences that are mentioned in the surah.
Okay.
And these 2 are very closely intertwined,
Okay.
which is this idea of, on the one hand, making a show of good deeds,
Okay.
but then simultaneously withholding even simple assistance.
So they want the praise and recognition for their actions.
Right.
But when it comes to actually helping, they hold back.
Exactly.
Even in small practical ways.
It seems contradictory,
It does.
but it speaks to a deeper point.
Oh, okay.
And the surah uses this very specific word to describe what they withhold.
Okay.
And it's this word mahun.
Now,
Yes, and this word mahun refers to these very basic, everyday items that people might need to borrow.
Okay.
Things like utensils or a bit of salt.
totally. Just those really basic things.
Exactly, even just a spark to light a fire.
And that's so interesting because you wouldn't think that withholding something so small
Right.
would be such a big deal.
Right.
But I guess it highlights just how little compassion they have.
Exactly. It's not that they're refusing to, donate huge sums of money or help with these massive burdens,
Yeah.
but even these tiny gestures of support they're not willing to extend.
It speaks to something deeper, I think.
Absolutely. And I think what it speaks to is that their focus is solely on outward appearances.
Oh,
gaining approval from other people.
But they don't believe in the recompense.
Right.
So their actions aren't sincere.
Exactly. They lack that sincerity.
And it's really just driven by self-interest.
Exactly. And, this makes me think about how often do we encounter this type of behavior today?
Oh, yeah.
Even without realizing it?
Right.
Maybe it's not about lending physical items anymore,
Right.
but it's about withholding a kind word.
Oh, wow.
Or a listening ear.
Yeah.
Or just a moment of our time to someone who needs it.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
So the essence of Ma'un can manifest in so many ways today.
And it can be really subtle, too.
Yes, absolutely.
We might not even recognize it in ourselves.
And, it could be about hoarding resources,
Okay.
exploiting others for personal gain, or simply being indifferent to the struggles of those around us.
Like that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Yes.
Like this surah is emphasizing that it's not what you say, but what you do that really matters.
Yes, our deeds reveal far more about our true character
Than any kind of outward display of piety.
than any facade of virtue.
Wow.
It's so true. And this idea of actions revealing our true character,
Yeah.
it reminded me of a hadith about social hypocrisy.
Oh, okay.
So the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him,
Yes.
he warned about a time when people's inner selves would be corrupted,
Oh?
but their outward appearances would seem virtuous. And he said that their religion would be mere hypocrisy,
Wow.
devoid of the fear of Allah.
And I think that hadith is so powerful and relevant to our world today.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like we're constantly surrounded by images and messages that prioritize appearances over substance.
It's true. It's so easy to present a certain image these days.
Right.
To project this aura of piety or generosity
Yeah, right.
without actually embodying those qualities in our actions.
Right. And the hadith goes on to describe the hypocrite's prayer as being like the cries of a drowning man,
Yes.
unheard and unanswered by Allah. And it's such a striking image. It really shows just how empty and pointless actions are when they're done just for show.
Right, because that emptiness, ultimately, it harms the individual.
Oh, how so?
It creates this disconnect between their inner self and their outward actions,
Okay.
leading to this sense of, spiritual dissatisfaction.
So when we look back at those 5 consequences that we've discussed from Surah Al-Ma'un,
Right.
the harshness towards orphans, neglecting to feed, the poor heedlessness of prayer ostentation, and withholding simple assistance.
Yes.
What's the big takeaway here?
Well, I think this surah is a very powerful reminder that true righteousness comes from aligning our actions with our beliefs.
Oh.
It's a call to really look inward, to examine our own intentions and motivations.
And to really try to be sincere.
Exactly, to strive for sincerity in everything that we do.
So it's not just about avoiding bad action,
Right.
but also actively trying to cultivate empathy, generosity, and sincerity,
Yes, because these are the building blocks of a truly fulfilling life.
both for ourselves and for our community.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that even small acts of kindness can have this huge ripple effect. Yeah. And I think that's why the pseudo focuses on Ma'un, those small, everyday acts of assistance.
Okay.
Because it's recognizing how important those are to foster a spirit of compassion and support within a society.
This deep dive has been really insightful.
It's amazing how much we can learn
I know.
from a surah that's just 7 verses long.
Right. And I think as we wrap up here,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay.
What small act of kindness can you do today to embody the spirit of this surah?
I love that.
It doesn't have to be some big grand gesture.
Right.
It could be just a kind word to a stranger, really listening to someone who needs it.
Yes.
Or just offering help to someone in need.
Because true change, it begins with each of us.
Yeah.
And by cultivating compassion and sincerity in our own lives, we can create a more just and caring world.
Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.